good afternoon, wherever you may be today when you're watching this webinar. We welcome you and thank you so much for joining the team at Recentre, talking about our last residential experience, which was our pilot. So joining me today will be Michelle Mcmaster and Michelle Duffy. And I just want to point out that if you at any time feel you need support or you're feeling triggered, there's please feel free to obviously leave the webinar. And then there's also contacts at the bottom of the screen. So we look forward to hearing from you as well after the webinar of what you have experienced during the webinar and any information or questions you have. So if you could turn off your camera and microphone, feel free to put any questions actually out to us if you're watching this after the fact. I don't know why that just slipped right to what we'll discuss. So what we're going to be discussing today in the agenda is who we are as the Recentre team, what our definition of trauma is, because there's so many options to choose from, our program overview and who we support, what the actual residential experience was like from both a participant and a therapist perspective. So I'm Holly Perreault, the founder and CEO of Recentre. Michelle Duffy was one of our participants, and Michelle Mcmaster was one of our therapists. And they'll both talk more about their experience and what their work was within the Recentre residential. So who are we and what are we passionate about? And we are passionate about trauma. Everything we do revolves around trauma, whether we're supporting individuals or supporting organizations and teaching people about trauma. So we do a lot of education, and then we also help people work through individual trauma. So on our team, not joining us tonight is Jane Braden. She's our operations leader, as well as she supports all our holistic work, including trauma-informed yoga. Neve Callahan, who you'll see at the end of the session tonight, she is our communications and she's also our logistics coordinator during the residential. We called her the house queen. Anne-Marie Brophy McCartney is not joining us tonight, but she is actually out of Dublin, and she is our trauma therapist focused on somatic and polyvagal. And then Michelle Mcmaster, who you will see tonight, is our trauma recovery specialist, focusing on all types of trauma and different types of support, which she'll talk about. So if you're watching this, if you just take a minute or a couple seconds and write down things that you've been thinking about or concerns about being in a residential. Our goal is that we'll answer that by the time this hour is over or one of our guests have answered it. If not, please send us a message to info@recentre.uk, or you can contact us at any of our social media outlets. So what is trauma and how does it impact us? There were so many options for us to decide what is trauma. And as we tried to articulate it, it means something different to all of us individually. So we just decided as an organization, we're using the one that's from SAMHSA, and I'll read it. Trauma refers to experiences that cause intense physical and psychological stress reactions. It can be from a single event, multiple events, or a set of circumstances experienced by an individual as physically and emotionally harmful or threatening, and that has lasting adverse effects on the individual's physical, social, and emotional or spiritual well-being. We really look at trauma from our organization as anything that is causing distress. An incident, again, could have been long-term, it could have been in childhood, that is currently causing you distress or has caused you distress in the past. So our approach for the residentials is, first of all, we meet each person to understand what your personal history is. So whatever your trauma history is, and we understand what support you've had in the past, what has worked, what has not worked. We would ask for information about your GP, if you've seen a therapist, if you're seeing one now. And then our options are also really, we want to find out what your goals are. So what is causing you the most emotional pain today? And what are your goals for the future? And everyone is going to have a different answer to this. What causes one person pain could be completely different to something else someone else is experiencing. That also could be based on age, gender, where you live. A lot of people are experiencing pain coming out of COVID. 1 in 5 have post-traumatic stress symptoms per the research. That is a good example of how 5 people could have very different experiences coming out of COVID based on what they went through during COVID. So once we meet with you, we would create a bespoke plan with each participant so we can be sure that when you're in the residential, the work that needs to be done for you to get support is included in our residential. During that time, we'll have different types of therapeutic experiences, different types of psychoeducation, which is really important to us, that we're continuing to educate you so you can learn and get new tools in your toolbox to take forward. We use coaching, support groups, and play to do that. So why our program? First of all, we believe healing with peer support is imperative. Me personally, I've had an experience of being able to go into a 30-day trauma program. Prior to that, I did it on my own. I went to therapy, and it just wasn't going deep enough. It wasn't getting the job done, if you will. I was maintaining life, but I wasn't healing overall. Going into a program like this where you have support, where other people can say, you know what, that happened to me as well, or I feel that way as well, just provides so much relief automatically just to hear other people say that. There's also something to be said about someone being able to say what happened to you. Gosh, that's really terrible that that happened to you. Because sometimes we start to minimize. I know in my experience, I've minimized my own abuse quite a bit. And when someone's like, geez, that's awful, it makes me reminds me that was awful, and maybe even help me then pay better attention to my feelings, my thoughts, and ensuring I'm getting good self-care. So some people, we realize we're getting a lot of feedback on, gosh, I don't want to sit in a group and talk about my issues. And Michelle, who's going to join us later, can share a little bit about this as she was a participant. But the whole point for us is that's a key piece of our work, is healing with others. The other thing is that's different about us is there's lots of places you can go in America, in here, in the UK, to get support if you have an addiction. We actually don't take anyone that's got an active addiction. We're not set up for that. We're not set up to detox. And that's just not our focus. Now, if you've been sober for a while, or you've been through an addiction program and now need more support, we definitely would love to talk to you about that to see when the right time is for you to join our program. Finally, again, a lot of organizations also, if it's a mental health organization or maybe support program, they want you to have a diagnosis, whether it's a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress or one of the multiple layers of diagnoses they may use when indeed we have trauma. You don't need a diagnosis to come to our program. So what does the program look like? So again, this was modeled after what I went through. I went through 2 different programs. I went to a 30-day inpatient program where I went and lived for 30 days and did different types of modalities for my healing. We're modeled after that, as well as I also did a 10-day outpatient where I stayed in a hotel and just went every day to the location where we got together. The work we did inside the buildings and within the group were similar models. So for us, what we do is you start with a process group. Well, actually, this next time we're going to start with a 1-day workshop. So it's going to be an 8-week program. It'll start with a 1-day in-person workshop, an intensive workshop, where you'll get to meet others that will be involved, and then get to see little pieces of the work that you'll do. So there will be a small piece of work a small piece of artwork. There will be a yoga practice. There will be a small piece of education learning about trauma and trauma response. So we'll work through all of that throughout the day. Then the following week, you'll start your process groups, which is virtual. We do virtual because we've had a lot of questions on this. One of the biggest reasons we're doing virtual is we really want this open to people all over. We don't want it to be tied that they can't go because they have to travel to an in-person. As we continue to grow and get more people, we'll definitely have that option at some point in our time. But right now it's online. So you'll do 7 weeks of online process group led by Michelle Mcmaster, who will be talking in just a little bit. And then we'll go into our 5-day residential, and it's actually 6 nights. This particular one's going to be in Donegal in the autumn. And you all stay together in the house. Your meals are covered. There's a schedule, and it's about 10-hour days of what I consider work, where you're working on yourself. And then you have free time for you and other people as part of the support group to bond, to start to make new friends, because that's what happened in our pilot group. The women that were there, one of the pieces of information we got from all of them is this amazing time to be able to meet new friends and really have time to talk about different things and laugh. There was so much laughter at our residential, and that's okay. We need laughter to get us through. Sometimes all the tears we're crying as well. So lots of stuff goes into the residential, and it's, some people I think said the word magic. It feels like magic when you go in and then when you come out. So the experience, again, I mentioned this, but it's 10 to 12 hours a day. There's lots of pieces of education. So usually it's a piece of education and then followed up by a piece of work, which could be either individual work or group work. We do therapeutic group work. We do trauma-informed play. So there's some type of play every day, whether it's a piece of art, whether it's an activity we're doing. We brought in drumming last time. We loved it. Everyone loved it. So that is our goal, is to always be able to bring something musical into our program. We had trauma-informed holistic practices. So yoga is a baseline of our program. Once or twice a day, there will be opportunity for trauma-informed yoga. We provide all the meals and beautiful accommodations. So you do not have to worry about any of that. You just get to work on yourself for the 5 days. And we offer separate groups for men and women. We're not at the point where we can offer co-ed, as we start to really get people to even understand what residentials are. We don't want that to be a challenge for people or a decision maker if they're co-ed. So we do offer 2 separate groups. I love this quote: "The best part of being with a group is that you don't have to do anything alone." And this really stands true, even when the work can feel very lonely, even when you're in a room with other people. Once you get through your piece of work, or you maybe process something, you have all this love surrounding you. You have support teams such as the therapist and the support group there to support you. And that's if we're sitting around a table. It could be if you're presenting. It could be if you're on the floor working on on something, or when you just want to throw rocks into the river. We'll support you. And maybe it's not about saying anything, it's just standing next to you when you're processing. And that, I would say, was one of the most powerful pieces of the residential to watch, for sure. So I'd love to invite Michelle Mcmaster to turn her camera on and come off mute.
Me, Holly.
Hi, Michelle. Let's see. I can hear you and you can hear me, right, Michelle?
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. So Michelle, I'll let Michelle talk about, I guess, Michelle, do you want to first just start of why did you decide to join the residential program and the program in general, the pilot?
Well, I suppose, as you know, Holly, I met yourself very briefly before you had kind of developed this program. And I knew that you had your own experiences and that real lived experience of what it was like to deal with the aftermath of trauma. And it was just your passion really came across about how much you wanted to support people trying to recover and heal from trauma. And I suppose at that time when you came along and put it to me, I was going through a hard time myself, because COVID had happened. And I suppose on the surface, I've always been someone who's really had it together and looked like I really had the shit together, and managed pretty well in life. But then lockdown happened and I kind of spiraled out of control, which actually resulted in me taking some time off work. I think it was about 6 or 7 months because I just couldn't manage. And I suppose some of that for me was about trying to keep control. And suddenly I had no control. So all the mechanisms I had in place fell apart. And I did reach out for mental health support, something I have never ever done in my life. And the waiting lists were huge. Professionals weren't seeing anyone at the time. And I just felt really lost. So for me, Recentre really came along at the right time.
Mm. Yeah. Timing is everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I remember us sitting at Starbucks, just having that conversation and you trying to get, I think, EMDR support at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what were your feelings as you went through the virtual meetings and met everyone, and we had the one-day event. What were you feeling even before the one-day event?
I'm not going to lie, I was really nervous because here in Northern Ireland, it's not something that we do. We're not very good talking about feelings and those things anyway. And when you do get the courage to do that, it's usually one-to-one and on your own. So I was a bit, what is this all about? What's going to go on? And thinking about what the other people were going to be like there. So I was really, really nervous and really unsure. And I think I did share some of those with you.
Yeah.
But I think it's just because it was new and different and not knowing what to expect or what that was going to look like.
Yeah. Yeah. And then going into the 5 days, what were you most concerned about? Like even the week maybe leading up to going into the residential?
Oh, well, I actually thought that it was okay because I'd sat in groups with these women and yourselves. I knew everybody and I thought everything was fine. And I think it was literally about a week, maybe 2 weeks before, I started feeling myself becoming overwhelmed again. And when I was starting to unpick some of that, I think it was for a start, not knowing where we were staying. Because obviously I have had a lot of trauma in my life and grown up in a house where things weren't safe. So things like was the doors going to be locked? And I know it's all women there and they're all safe in my logical head. But the trauma part of me was terrified. And they were really real concerns for me. And actually there was a few times where I was thinking, am I going to do this? Am I going to get there? I don't know if I can. And the Recentre group and yourselves were amazing. You were able to bring those concerns down, tell me there was locks on the doors and try and make me feel safe. And some of the other things were around, and I know everybody's trauma is different, but for me, in terms of what the bedroom was like, was there going to be dark mahogany? Was there going to be floral bedding? And that might seem silly to some people, but they were really real concerns and triggers for me. But obviously, these were amazing again. And all that was sorted out and kind of put me at ease a bit. Another really big concern for me was I have never been vulnerable with anyone. I always kind of come across that I'm okay, I'm managing well. And I was really worried about what's going to come up, how's my trauma going to show up? What's that going to look like? And what are people going to think of me?
Mm.
So I was essentially a nervous wreck. I think
Mm.
actually the whole way down in the car, but I did get there.
Yeah, one thing I want to just also point out, and you can confirm this, but you had great support from your husband, yes, to do
Yeah.
this program. Yeah.
He was amazing.
Yeah. And we don't talk about that a lot in this this particular session, but having someone to support you, to help you prepare to go and maybe encourage you to go and help you with some of those scary thoughts, and then to be there after the fact, right?
Yeah.
When you get home. So I think, yeah, he was really supportive, which was, I think, helpful for sure to have that. And not everybody's going to have that support, but in your case, from my perspective, I thought it was very helpful.
Yeah, and I definitely needed that, because at the times when I was literally sitting Googling the whole building, trying to see the layouts of the room, using every excuse, because that's what trauma does.
Yeah.
And that's your coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
And he was kind of there to say, it's your defenses, bring it down. But even if I didn't have the support of my partner, I have to say, you know, all the Recentre staff and therapists were amazing. I knew I could reach out at any time, and I did. But also the other girls in the group, you know, they were there, and you could go talk about your concerns, and they did the same. And we kind of supported and brought each other around.
Yeah.
And actually, when we arrived there, you know, it was so lovely, because everybody was checking in with everyone else to make sure that you were feeling safe and that you were okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it was beautiful that first night. It was really good. So the things you were scared about, you just talked about how you were able to, some of those things, we helped you get there, right? And make you feel safe. But there did come a time where you had to go into the program and start to do the work and share your feelings with others and in front of others. So can you maybe just talk a little bit about what that experience was like for you, just once you got in, and because you definitely did the work, you dug right in there. What was it that helped you start to do the work and talk about things you had never talked about before?
I think it was, now I'm not going to lie, it is scary putting yourself out there and talking, but listening to everyone else and their stories and the feedback that everybody was getting. So that was one of the things I really liked. Was that when you told your story or shared your feelings, you got feedback from everyone. That included both, you know, the staff and therapists and the other women in the group. And I think for me, and most people, you kind of brush your trauma off and the awful things that's happened to you. And for me, it was the first time I was actually able to sit down and say, oh my goodness, what happened to me was awful. And I have never been able to say that before. And I think that came from the support of the group and the feedback that came back.
Wow.
And actually being able to say it out loud.
Yeah.
And to have people there around you. Now, it was difficult, and there were times where I was thinking, it's too much, I can't. But that's the trauma coming up, because you're not used to kind of facing it head on.
Yeah.
But to work through that and to have support there from everyone around you, and I mean genuine support. There wasn't one person there that you thought, you know, they're sitting there because they have to. They were genuinely sitting there and being present with you. And hands down, that has been one of the biggest things for me. And I know I've spoke a wee bit before, you know, I'm someone who has managed on my own, doesn't need anyone. Find it really hard to trust people. I never let anyone truly in. I have associates and people around me, but they only get so far. And then that's enough. And when I went on that residential, I truly let everyone in. And for me, that has been amazing, because I've learned it's okay to trust people. And when you trust people, you won't get hurt and they won't hurt you.
I'm just going to take a moment for that. I'm going to let that soak in, and for you as well. That's beautiful. So that's one of the things you took away from the experience, obviously, is trust. Is there anything else you'd want to add that you really took away from the experience?
I think another thing was, that I have what you would call imposter syndrome. So never feeling good enough, always kind of fading into the background. And I think you all probably remember me on those first calls, sitting like a quiet, nervous mouse. And every time I spoke, my legs were shaking and I could barely form my words. My brain would stop engaging. And actually, as everyone's been saying, I have found my voice.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying, I'm fully there. I still have a little bit to go, because I'm talking years of hearing that you're not good enough and being made to feel that. So it's not just going to wash away overnight, but I am starting to believe I am good enough. And being able to speak and let my voice be heard. And actually, I'm sitting here now and there's not a shake in sight.
Wow. That's huge. And for those people who don't know Michelle, when she says she found her voice physically, I meant obviously in general, she has found the courage, but she has physically found her voice. Michelle had a very, very soft voice, to the point, and I think Michelle Mcmaster would say this as well, is you'd have to get really close to hear what she's saying. That is definitely different now, Michelle. You are speaking bold, you're speaking up, you're louder. So it's beautiful. I love that so much.
And the other thing to add just with that is, when I come out of the residential, I felt really good in myself, and it's really hard to put into words how different I felt. But people who didn't even know that I was on this residential were coming up and saying to me, there's something really different about you. I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it, but you just seem more confident or, more bubbly. And that was just lovely to hear.
Wow. And they had no idea that you had went through that process.
Some people did, but some people didn't. And even those people were coming up and recognizing that.
That's wonderful. One last thing I want to ask you about the residential, and then I have a couple other questions. If you're okay talking about this, is we do have a part of the rules. One of the rules of the residential is no phone, no laptop. And there's lots of reasons we do that. And there was definitely, I won't lie, there was lots of resistance to the no phone from the whole group. But I kept most of that requirement, and what we did is gave the phones back halfway through. But if you don't mind, would you mind sharing about that situation and what you did actually when we gave the phones back halfway through?
Yeah, and I'll just acknowledge I was one of the ones who was resistant initially, very resistant, and putting barriers up. But before I went, actually, my partner was saying to me, you're using your phone an awful lot, you're on it all the time. And he was reflecting back to me that I was using that as a form of avoidance and dissociation. So we sat down and spoke, and I'd said, you know what, I'm going to go without the phone. I didn't know if I was going to stick to that or not, but that's what I set out to do. And actually, when you give the phones back to everyone else, I didn't take my phone.
That's right.
Because I just found it so refreshing, being able to switch off. And I know everyone's different, but I tend to get drawn into other people's problems and worries and feeling like I need to fix the world. So for me, I thought, no, this is my time and I'm going to use it for me. And I actually dreaded getting the phone back. I think actually when you give it to me, it's like, I don't even want to switch it on. It was like Neve. I was kind of avoiding her because she was holding the phone. Don't come near me with that. And I actually didn't use the phone. I switched it on briefly to let my partner know that it was on the way home. But didn't use it that weekend at all. And in fact, I have reduced my phone usage, because I have found a real benefit of doing that, just to take time out for me.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because you can actually go to there's technology residentials now, which is so interesting. And so that was not the intent, of course. It was not even a thought, but it has been a huge benefit for you, right?
Yeah.
Overall. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, because that's one of my favorite stories from the residential for sure. So Michelle, first of all, thank you for sharing, and as always, being just so open with your own story. So there's probably people listening to this and still going, that all sounds horrendous and scary. No way. What would you tell others who are unsure, still not quite sure what to do about this, or if to join us?
Honestly, yes, it's scary and it's new, but it is the best thing that I have ever done for myself. And yes, there was resistance, and there were times where it was hard, but it was nothing that I couldn't deal with or manage. And it was the first time I had support around me when I was dealing with the trauma that was coming up. And there my brains went. But definitely, I would say do it. If I had the opportunity to do this again, I would do it in a heartbeat. You spend money, you go on holidays. I know personally myself, I've spent so much money on therapy and doing other things that I thought would make me feel better. And none of it ever worked at a deeper level. It was just surface. This is the first thing in my life that has actually really made me feel better. And I'm not saying that I'm healed, because healing is a lifelong journey.
Yeah.
But
right.
To go from where I was feeling to where I am now, like, it's priceless. And I can't thank the team enough. So if you're nervous about it, just do it. Just do it. Trauma and healing is uncomfortable, but you have to do the hard stuff to get out the other end.
Well, you answered my question as if you would do it again, and you said absolutely yes. So, I would like to ask one last question of you, though, because I want people to realize this was our pilot, and it turned out wonderful. But we're always looking at, the point of doing a pilot is to see what went well, what things could have done differently. So what is the one thing, if you could leave us with this, what's the one thing you would change?
I think you already addressed it at the beginning, Holly. Was the only thing that I would have changed personally for me would have been to meet everybody first before doing the online, because I felt that's where we kind of connected a bit more. And when you see people in person, it just adds that additional layer. But everything else, I think you thought it out from beginning to end, from the meals to even the little teddy bears and the wee care packs. Just everything was thought out so well. So that is the only thing that I would change.
Okay, great. Is there anything else you want to say?
No, I think I've talked a lot.
You did great. Thank you so much for being, again, honest and authentic. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so I'm overwhelmed and a little emotional over that, because this has been something in my heart for so many years. And when Michelle said I've thought of everything, I've thought of things because I've been planning this in my head and on paper for many years, and I had my own experience. Two different types of my own experience. So I had a really good foundation of what I wanted it to look like. So I'm so glad it landed. I would like now to bring Michelle Mcmaster on, if she'd come off mute, and talk a little bit about this program from a therapist perspective. Michelle, are you there?
I'm here. Yes, Holly.
Hi. Thank you for joining us. Michelle, first of all, would you just give a little update on what you do? What is it that you do? Because you do all the things, but I'll let you say what you do.
I do all the things. A lovely way to put that.
And this is the other Michelle. And during the residential, we had another Michelle. So we had Michelle, the other Michelle, and another Michelle. So this is the other Michelle.
I do trauma therapy, and I do that on a one-to-one basis, and I do it on a small group basis, and I have delivered residentials in the past in various different guises related to mental health, suicide prevention and trauma recovery. I deliver training and so on in that as well now, especially now that there has been so much discussion, thankfully at last, about the need for trauma-informed practices and trauma-informed services. So I have done that for over 40 years. That's been my lifelong passion, is to find ways that work for those people who are in most distress, and that has come from personal experiences. It's come from experiences of those very, very close to me, of experiences of people that I have worked alongside and with, and it just comes from a place of knowing that if there are people hurting in this world, and there are some of us at a point in time who are able to reach out and connect and help others to begin to heal, then I just want to be part of that.
Yeah. So with that said, you had not heard of Recentre before, but what made you take a chance on working with Recentre and this somewhat new program in Northern Ireland?
So I was introduced, we were connected via a mutual contact, which was helpful, because that in itself means you know that somebody's connecting you to somebody else. Yeah. I think the reason why I would get involved with anything, and have done over the years, will always be the same reason. It'll be about the people that I'm working alongside. And if it's not the right people, I'm really clear, I won't do it. Simple as that. If I don't, so this feeds in very much to how the program works and how effective any program like this will be, and that is about trust. And Michelle already touched on all of that. The element of trust is huge for me. If I don't have a sense that I can trust and work alongside the person, in this case yourself, Holly, your good self, if I had any instinct of saying that you were here for any reason other than the same level of passion and desire to bring hope, to bring strength, to bring courage to others, if that wasn't there and the motivation was very different, then I would have simply said, thanks very much for speaking to me, but no thanks. But it wasn't like that. Yeah. So what happened was we spoke by phone first, and then we got to meet up, just about meet up, because even at that stage we were still in some of the lockdown phase, which is again feeds into why there was no first meeting in person, but we'll come to that for the group. But to meet you in person and just have a sense of who you are and where your motivation lies, that for me is the biggest thing, and knowing that everything that Recentre stands for is what I stand for as well, and that sense of that desire to contribute, to change, to growth. Yeah.
And Michelle's been one of our, I said, we happened to meet the person that did an introduction to us. We both saw him this past week, which was great. And I thanked him very much for that introduction, because without that, you've been a huge supporter of ours, and then also helping us develop as we've continued to develop the program. So thank you for those very kind words. So Michelle, you also stepped in to run the process group, which was such a huge relief for me, because I wanted it to be run by a therapist that had already gotten support or had experience running a process group. So can you tell us a little bit about what is a process group?
So a process group is more or less what it says on the tin. It's a process. Mm-hmm. And every version of process group will be different, because the process with different individuals within that will always be different. The process itself is always a similar starting point and ending point, though, which is bringing people together who have, in most cases, no prior connection to each other, no prior knowledge, and therefore the essential part of everything about a process group is about pace and about relationship and about building trust and developing that, and that absolutely cannot be rushed. The challenge for a process group that's running at a point in time which we were in, which was no one was meeting up in person, there was no physical way we could bring people together in a group setting at that point. that led to the additional element then of bringing people onto a screen to meet each other for the first time, as Michelle has already alluded to, and developing and building a sense of relationship through a screen.
Yeah.
No easy task, I have to say. Just no easy task, no easy way around it. So therefore you will find that in any group there will be different needs, different starting points, different challenges, different nerves, different experiences, and the only way to approach that is to take time to let everyone have their own voice heard, no matter how small and how mouse-like it might be, Michelle, to have those voices heard, even if it is just one name. So there is a process that goes with that about making sure that everyone has a tiny, small amount of time each to be heard, even if it's no more than that. There's also the opportunity for those who might want to then give more, share more, open up more at the very early stages. Depends who the person is. So the approach to a process group is for myself as the facilitator of that is very much about watching out and getting to know every single person who's in the group. So the phrase that goes with that is the helicoptering that you do whenever you're in groups. And over the years, I have been very familiar with doing that in-person group settings. Over the last 2 years, we've all had to get more familiar doing that and an online version. Doing it for a group that includes the experiences that Michelle has touched on and that all the others have their own equivalents of, I mean, was a huge challenge. And the thing that for myself, again, as a facilitator, the thing that gets me through that and allows me to really face that challenge and deal with it is knowing how absolutely, in how much people are in a place of pain and are gasping for help. And again, Michelle said that. So I don't know, there's a lot I can say Michelle didn't say about any of this. Yeah. But it really is about knowing people are in pain and they are gasping, they are desperate. And when somebody's in that position, they don't want to have to do their own work, not at the beginning of it. They need someone else to be there who will hold them and say, we'll do some of the work for you. We'll make this part of it as easy and as palatable as is possible. And that's tiny, tiny, tiny little steps, tiny, tiny, tiny little bites, tiny little opening up and then closing again. And knowing that that is completely okay and that it's completely healthy. And from a trauma perspective, that it's completely natural, that it's the word titration is used by Peter Levine, tiny, tiny little drops at a time. And that's what we were doing through that whole process. And one of the things that came out of that, I think every woman said this to me at one point, is they felt so safe. You created such a safe environment. To be able to do that online, to your point, is no easy task, but also takes a special kind of person, I think, to do that. And every one of them is like, we are in a safe bubble. And that, I loved that, because even in the beginning, they still felt safe, right? And it just got more and more so. But I think that you created that situation and that space for them. Well, thank you for saying that. And I appreciate that that is what others said then, because that is the goal. That's the goal, is for everyone to feel safe. And once they're safe, then they can explore a tiny little bit more each time. That's right. Yeah. And the other thing we did, I think, because it was online and we started with more people, right? We always are going to have people that come out of the group. Usually we'll start with a higher number. Is we had another person that was there as a support person for you, actually, for you and the team, right? And the group, who could chat if someone felt they needed a timeout or felt triggered. They could go have a separate chat with someone else that we had just as Michelle's associate. I think that's what we called her associate, to do that. And that is so important, because there is something like this, something on this scale, something that is going to be and has proven to be so powerful, cannot happen with any one individual. And that to me is one of the essential parts of being part of a team. and working together, knowing there is no part of it can happen with one person, and working alongside the associate person who was there, which was the lovely Siobhan, who was elsewhere in the world as well, even in terms of geography. But what that did for me was give me that sense of knowing that there was some backup there, that even in person, that would have been very different. Online, it was about being able to use the private chat functions as was needed. So there may have been messages coming from 2 or 3 people at a time, and knowing that there was someone else there who's going to respond or flag them up to me or highlight them to the group. I mean, that's just invaluable. And knowing that that support was there throughout at all levels with the rest of your team. So Neve's on this call as well. And obviously Jane is not on the call, but was around, and Anne-Marie contributing in terms of the education and some of the therapy. All of that allowed me also then to feel safe, because if the therapist or the facilitator doesn't feel safe, then no one in the group will be able to feel safe. And that's the whole thing about trauma and nervous systems. You need nervous systems to hold. You need, if you've got a set of individuals together or individually at any one point, and you have a nervous system in front of them that doesn't feel safe, then they'll just turn and walk away.
That's such a good point. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because we actually, I'm hoping some trauma therapists are going to watch this, because we are still looking. We want to have more residentials, and to do that, we need more staff that would be willing to join us, right, to help us run groups and help us work in the residential.
Yeah.
So thank you for all of that on the process group. And Michelle is going to be running our next process group. So if anything she said inspires you, she'll be helping with the next one as well. So you mentioned you've worked with a lot of residentials, right? You've done different types of residentials, different ways, led different groups. What did you find different about this particular residential, if anything?
So what's always different about a residential are the people. That's the fundamental starting point. No 2 residentials will ever be the same, and I have run some that have been the same process of residential numerous times. I never arrive at a residential thinking I know what's going to happen. You just can't. True. So individuals will always make it different. Dare I say it, the other thing that's slightly different about this particular residential, and I say this in the kindest, most gracious, generous way that I possibly can, was there was a lovely, if a little bit quirky, odd American lady leading this whole thing.
Quirky?
Yeah. And that is different. And for those who are listening, I know not everyone will be in Northern Ireland. For this particular group, people have been based in Northern Ireland, but for others who are elsewhere in the world, there is a different feel, a different sense of culture, a different sense of understandings even that go behind language, processes, etc. So we've all had the chance at the residential to chat even with yourself about what's different for you seeing this happen in Northern Ireland versus what might happen if it happened in a completely different country versus what you experienced in America. So for me, the differences were about fundamentally the people and the mix of that, and that each time allows it, and in this occasion in particular, allows me to feel like I have a challenge to meet as well, and I love it. Because if I went to one that I knew what to expect, I would have no interest. I don't want to go somewhere where I know what to expect. I want to go somewhere where I find that I'm curious, and that again is about staying healthy in my own body and my own brain. The curiosity, the fun, the playfulness, allow those things together, allow the really, really hard work to be done. For me as the therapist. If that wasn't there, then I would find it too much for me as an individual as well. But having all those elements allow me to rise to it, basically.
Yeah, we did have a lot of fun and a lot of laughs, and we talk a lot about that it's okay. You have to have laughter with trauma. You just have to. Because you have tears, you have laughter, and it gets us through. And it could be as crazy as our experience having a sheep. Having our own sheep for 3 days.
There was a sheep knocking on the windows.
There was. For 3 days, we had a sheep looking into our yoga space for 3 days. That kept us laughing a lot. So it could be that simple. So I just want to keep an eye on the time as well. But so why So as a therapist, right, from a therapist perspective, why or when would you recommend or suggest someone to look at Recentre?
I would recommend anyone looks at it right now. I don't think there's a waiting game for looking at it and for checking out what it's about. I think my very real experience of anyone coming to residentials, again, has been alluded to, is that there is a process to go through long before you actually make the commitment. So looking at it, checking out, listening to this type of recording, checking out the website, checking out the literature that goes with it, that's an important part of building an element of trust. It's not a full trust until you meet people, but you can't just arrive and have that, switch on. In terms of attending, I think, again, that is very much about it being the right time for you to want to change. Right. And if somebody is struggling with their life, and if somebody is really finding things difficult and holding themselves together and feeling like they aren't ready to change, they don't want to change, well, there's no one in this world is going to help them to change. When someone gets to the point, and some of that comes through the conversations, again, that Michelle talked about with yourself in advance, when someone realizes there is an opportunity to change, they might want to change, but they might not be ready to change. So when they find that the readiness to change meets the opportunity, that's it. And that is about conversations, getting in touch, the little, just can I ask one little question and go away for another month and think about it. Yeah. And that, in terms of a trauma experience of life, is to me the only real way that can happen. And those folks who will come and will stay with it and come through out the other side are those who have met the place where they're absolutely ready to change and they have found the right match of opportunity, in this case through Recentre.
Yeah.
And you will know that by reaching out and asking some questions and checking it out first.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Is there anything else, Michelle? First, I'll just say, you mentioned what you get out of being part of the program, and what we've gotten is so much knowledge, right? Your teachings to us, your pushback when you thought something could be done differently, or adding another option to do things, have all made us who we are and made it as great as it was. So I just want to thank you again for that. Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to add that you think someone who's listening to this or watching this might need to know?
I think it has already been said, and I'll simply reinforce that at this point in time in our world, we have all come through some collective experience that we still cannot in any way articulate in this world. I think for those people who have experienced either lifelong trauma or more recent trauma prior to that, or now subsequent to that, you've added in a complexity that allows the language of trauma to be more visible now. Mm-hmm. So what I would add is that right now I just sense the privilege of having opportunities like this for people to come and say, there are now ways that we can help. Even the science of trauma-informed services and the science of the nervous system is relatively new. The knowledge of that is not new, but the science behind it, the technology that measures it, is there. There has never been a better time. There has never been a better time to draw on some of the most fundamentally life-changing opportunities. Mm-hmm. And so I would just say, yeah, now is the time.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Michelle. Both Michelles, Michelle and the other Michelle, thank you so much. We appreciate you. Okay, so let's see. There we go. If you had written down 3 things that you might have been concerned about, the question now is, did we answer your question? Either one of the Michelles answered it, or I was able to answer it. And if not, please, as we mentioned, send us an email to info@recentre.uk, or one of our contact us through social media. I'm hitting the next button. It's going very slow. So I think we had a couple questions come in through social media. Neve, would you like to come offline? And what questions did we have?
Yes, thank you, Holly. First off, just what incredible insight from you both, Michelle. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. I certainly feel very lucky to be a part of Recentre, and listening to you all just really reaffirms that, you know, it's so needed what we have here, and it works, which it's incredible. So
Yes.
so we've had a few questions come through social media, and we'll just get a few quick answers too. So Holly, you briefly alluded to this earlier, but someone asked, will the process groups always be online?
Yeah. Someday we want to be able to do them. I'll be honest. When I came here, as Michelle mentioned, I'm American. I had big dreams that we were going to go full bore. Lots of people were going to join right away. That, you know, it's gone a lot slower than I thought, which is totally okay as well. So we will, you know, when the need comes, we will have them in person. That's what I'll say. So hopefully, you know, when that is probably depends on a lot of the those people who are in pain and how many are coming for support. So when the need is there, we will do them in person.
Yeah, and if it is ever an issue or concern for anyone, just to drop us an email or reach out to us through any messaging platforms as well. And one more question. Someone asked, why is it only a women's group for this next program?
Yeah, so we're not doing co-ed. I think I mentioned a little bit is because it's so new, and actually some of the other organizations in England that do longer residentials, their census is usually 85% women and like 15% men. So interestingly, men are not signing up as much. So we have a men's program. We have a pilot. We have a men's pilot we absolutely want to do. We've committed to doing it. We need 6 men to sign up for that, and we haven't quite got that. So if you're interested in that, please reach out to us, because we definitely want to do that. But we're not at a place to have co-ed. I don't know when we will be. I went to a co-ed one, but there was 150 people there. So it was a very different situation. But please, if you are a male and you are interested, give us a call. We'll put you on the list. Is that all the questions, Neve?
That is everything.
Okay. So our next program, we're ready. Please give us a call. We have 12 spots available. It'll be in lovely Donegal. That's probably my accent saying that incorrectly. And again, you're not committing just because you contact us. So it starts with a beautiful phone call with Neve to give you more information, and she can work through that and share the pricing and the dates. So please give us a call so you can get on that list. And I'll leave you with this: just because no one else can heal or do your inner work for you doesn't mean you can, should, or need to do it alone. So please let us support you in your healing. Here's all the ways you can get a hold of us. We also have a phone number you can give us a call. And if we don't pick up, we work all different hours, depending. There's 3 of us right now. We're working different hours. We will absolutely get back to you in 24 hours. So with that, a beautiful thank you to the Michelles. I'm so grateful. And Neve, you as well. So I hope everyone enjoyed this and got a lot of information out of it. And we hope to see you soon.